I first learned about mental illness and stigma because of a heart defect. Now, if you're thinking, that's odd, you're absolutely right. It is an odd way to learn about mental illness and stigma, but I will explain. Tonight I'm going to share with you some of the hard lessons I've learned about this complex challenge, starting with this. Stigma is actually a 4-letter word. Now, I can see some of you counting the letters. You're like, wait a second. No, there are actually 6 letters in the word stigma, but I mean it as a metaphor for the 4-letter swear words we would never use in certain situations. I'm talking about the stigma that still surrounds mental illness and that is just simply unnecessary, and it's inappropriate, and it's offensive. And if you think of it in those terms, it's truly a 4-letter word. I'd like to share with you how I came to this realization. I'd like you to take a moment and imagine a boy, someone you know, someone who is 9 years old. He could be your son, he could be your nephew, or he could be your friend's son. Now I'd like you to picture him sitting right here, cross-legged on the floor, and imagine that he's watching TV after school. Can you see him? Now imagine that all of a sudden he calls out to you, terrified, and he says, "Help, something's wrong with my heart." And you rush over to him, helpless and concerned. I was that boy. I was actually watching Three's Company after school, as I did every day, when one day my heart abruptly beat so fast, see if I can do this right, I thought it was going to burst. And when I called my dad over, he felt how fast my heart was actually racing. His face just went white. I soon learned I had a rare nerve defect in my heart that would require open heart surgery to fix. Now, the surgery was absolutely terrifying, of course, painful, not fun, but I came out the other side with a repaired heart and, after a long recovery, my full health. Now, when I tell this story every time, I'm still to this day overwhelmed by the fact that I was surrounded in love and support during this entire time. It was a 4-year journey from when I was first experiencing my heart racing to when I was diagnosed and ultimately had the surgery. And not once during that time did anyone treat me like I had done something wrong. Not once did my friends seem uncomfortable with my illness. And not once did my teachers question my motivation or work ethic when I had to miss 2 months of school. I was allowed to face that challenge with 0 stigma from those around me. I had absolutely no idea how lucky I was. Only 12 years old, you can't really blame me for figuring it out yet, but I go through the period from 12 until 26. During those years, I enjoyed the kind of health we all so easily take for granted. You don't think about how you're doing, you just occasionally get a cold and a flu, and otherwise you're fine. And I enjoyed that from 12 to 26. My heart was great, everything was fine, I wasn't limited by my health at all. And then, things changed rather dramatically when I suddenly started experiencing what I would later learn was clinical depression. At the time, I had no idea what it was. All I knew was I would suddenly feel completely cut off from everyone around me in my life. I would feel unable to connect with people, and it was mental and physical. Now, describing clinical depression to anyone who's never experienced it can be a little tricky because, and I'm one of them, we've all used the word depressed to describe a mood that we're in that's temporary, like sadness or melancholy or frustration with the cold in March. I'm really depressed about the weather. We've said that. We all do that. The reality, though, is that clinical depression, the way I experienced it, was much more physical. It was much more like the worst flu you've ever had. I felt it in every fiber of my being. And I'm going to share with you a couple of quick stories to help you understand the way it impacted me. I was completely consistent in my personality before I had experienced depression. I was energetic, optimistic, friendly, gregarious. I'm Irish background. That's just the way I was, and I was always like that. And then suddenly I would have this lack of energy, inability to connect with people, and I noticed that I'd go to work I worked at an office in downtown Montreal, and I would find myself every 30 to 45 minutes finding a reason to go to this bathroom. We had one bathroom in the whole office that was totally private, and I would go there and I would basically hide. I would take 10, 20-minute breaks, and those breaks, they were so that I didn't have to talk to anyone, and so that I didn't have to do my work. And I was in a job I loved, and I liked my colleagues a lot. A lot of them were my friends. But I had all of a sudden talking with them and doing my work, things that had seemed so easy before were suddenly very, very difficult. The other thing was lunch times. Lunchtime became extremely difficult because instead of going out and socializing, I now was going out downtown Montreal, walking up and down St. Catherine Street, looking for a place to eat alone. Thing was that apparently making a decision on where to eat at lunch is also something that's hard to do when you're clinically depressed. And I would walk all the way up St. Catherine and all the way back, and I'd waste my entire lunch hour, and I wouldn't even eat, literally because I couldn't decide where to go. Then I'd go back to work, and I would take another one of those bathroom breaks in the afternoon, and I would stare at myself and say, how the hell am I going to get through this day? So if somebody says to you that they're suffering from clinical depression, or if you ever experience clinical depression, the first thing you should have, and the first feeling you should have, is empathy, because that person is really, truly suffering. Now, for me, the journey didn't end with depression. When my depression lifted, the first, second, third, and fourth episode that I had, it didn't just lift back to feeling like myself. It lifted to feeling a little too good. It turned out that I was experiencing hypomania and ultimately mania. So I would go from needing 18 hours a day to sleep on the most severe depressions to needing 4 hours a night of sleep, which I've never done in my entire life. Suddenly I was waking up and jogging on the mountain in Montreal at 5:30 in the morning, and I have never run in my entire life before or since. I had so much physical energy that I just didn't know what to do with it, and my mind was racing. I think I might somewhat understand what you were describing, Chuck, the idea that you have this never-ending torrent of thoughts, and it's a very strange thing. People ask me, and it's a fair question, when I describe depression the way that I just did, and they hear about this torrent of energy, they say, well, is mania kind of fun? And it's a fair question, but the truth is that we all need rest every single day to recover and to be able to do what we need to do. Mania doesn't let you get that rest. And so every day you're getting a little bit further behind, and it's a very unhealthy state. And if it goes to the most severe places, like a manic episode, which I had in 2005, that lasted 6 consecutive days of a level of energy that is entirely unsustainable, and I didn't sleep one wink for 6 straight days. So take a second and imagine the people in this room. I hope all of you are very healthy right now. And if all of you stayed up and didn't sleep for the next 6 days, none of you would be in good shape, because we all need our sleep. We all need that rest. If you're manic and you don't sleep for 6 days, things get very complicated very quickly. I'm going to give you one. There's a million stories from my manic episode. I'll give you one example that happened in the middle of it after 3 days. And one of the strange things I did, and try to imagine what it was like for the people in my life. I was visiting my brother and sister-in-law who have a hot tub. I'm manic, I can't sleep, they have a hot tub. I figure, you know what, maybe that will help me relax. So I go into the hot tub, I was on my own, and after about 35, 45 seconds, I was bored, and I was distracted, and I needed something else to do. So I got out of the hot tub, and I started doing yoga-like poses on their deck. I was stretching and doing all this stuff, which in and of itself is a little weird, but let me tell you what time of year it was. It was January, and it was -20 out. My sister-in-law stood in the kitchen window for about 3 minutes going, what on earth is he doing? And then she realized that I wasn't going to stop. So she came out, and she had to say, Jason, please get back into the hot tub, because you're going to freeze. And I went, oh, okay, I'll do that, because she asked me to, but the truth was, I didn't even feel cold. When you are fully manic, it is almost a dissociative state, and it can be very, very complicated. And for me, it ultimately led to hospitalization. However, once I was diagnosed as having bipolar disorder, which if you haven't already guessed, that's what it was that I was suffering from, something interesting happened. I first hit a wall of realizing that I need to figure out how to deal with this illness, and I wasn't doing it the way I did with my heart problem. See, with my heart problem, I treated that like something was failing in my body. With all of these symptoms I've been describing, I thought something was wrong with me. And I was really struggling with this, and that is self-stigma. That is taking the stigma that I'm trying to ask others to not do, and I was applying it to myself. And the truth was, I was part of the problem all along. Until I experienced a mental illness, I was quietly judging those in my life who suffered from depression as having a lack of motivation. I thought it was a character flaw. It was something that I couldn't relate to, and I certainly didn't respect. Well, if that's the way you think, even privately, and then you start to experience something like this, it can be very disorienting, and you can really be stubborn about admitting what it is you're going through. So what happened for me was I finally clued in that I needed to stop having stigma towards myself, and I did that. But then I had to deal with the stigma from other people. People who, like I said before, no one was uncomfortable about my heart problem, but they were very uncomfortable about my bipolar disorder. And I experienced outright judgment, outright discrimination as a result of it, and I realized something very simple. Why was there all this empathy and support when my heart was failing, but now it's not here that my brain is failing? Because that's all it was. And so I recognized that I had an opportunity, because I have a unique story and I'm comfortable getting up here and speaking to you, I realized that I had the ability to help others by sharing my experiences and insights. And so I started talking. And in doing this, I'm hoping for some very simple things. I'm hoping that if you know someone in your life who suffers from mental illness, and statistics say that's very likely, or if you suffer from one yourself, you will learn more about the negative impacts of mental illness and stigma, that you will show empathy to yourself or to that other person should it come up, and that you will treat that illness no differently than you would a physical illness like cancer. I'm asking you to be a part of the effort to clean up our act. Stigma is a 4-letter word. Let's get rid of it. Thank you.